Don't sign a thing. Please, just believe me, the young nurse whispered in terror. And then I realized they were trying to kill my sister. You're about to make the hardest decision of your life, pulling the plug on your dying sister. Your heart is shattered. Your world is crumbling. But then, a stranger grabs your wrist, her eyes wide with terror, and whispers, "Don't sign anything. Please, just trust me. In 10 minutes, you'll understand why." Can you even begin to comprehend the sickening drop in your stomach? Because in those next 10 minutes, my entire reality was about to violently unravel, revealing that the woman I loved more than anything wasn't dying from an illness, but was being systematically murdered by the two people who stood closest to her bedside. Have you ever had that gut feeling, that primal scream inside you, that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong, but everyone around you insisted you were just overreacting? Drop a comment below and tell me about it, because that instinct, it might just save a life. And if this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Twisted RT Stories. Your support helps me bring you more true stories that desperately need to be told. It all started 3 days earlier. My peaceful retirement morning shattered by a phone call. It was Richard, my brother-in-law, his voice shaking. My baby sister, Diana, had collapsed at home. Brain aneurysm, he'd said. She was on life support. The doctors weren't hopeful. 58. Vibrant. Full of life. Just 2 weeks ago, at our monthly lunch, we'd laughed about getting older, about her dream trip to Italy. Now Richard was telling me she might never wake up. I drove through the night, Ohio to Nashville, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Diana and I were more than sisters. We were survivors. After our parents died young, it was just us. I'd practically raised her, barely an adult myself. I'd walked her down the aisle 15 years ago when she married Richard. He seemed perfect then, a successful investment banker who adored her, bought her the house she always wanted, promised to take care of her forever. When I finally reached her hospital room at 2 in the morning, Richard was there, red-eyed, seemingly devastated. He hugged me, telling me the doctors had found no brain activity. Diana, he insisted, would want to go peacefully, with dignity. He was already talking about funeral arrangements, how she never wanted to be kept alive by machines. I was too numb, too consumed by grief to question any of it. I just held her still warm hand and sobbed. The next 2 days blurred into a haze of sympathetic doctors, Richard's hushed phone calls about funeral homes, and me, a silent vigil by Diana's bedside, watching the machines breathe for her. But a persistent, icy worm of unease began to gnaw at me. Little things. Discrepancies. The doctors, when talking prognosis, never quite met my eyes. Richard kept pushing for me to sign the DNR, to authorize removing life support. His urgency felt off. And then there was her. This woman younger, maybe in her 30s, who kept appearing at odd hours, standing close to Richard, touching his arm with a familiarity that screamed more than just friend. When I asked Richard who she was, he quickly dismissed it. "Oh, that's Cassidy. She's a grief counselor the hospital assigned. She's been such a help." A grief counselor? In designer handbags? And looking at my brother-in-law like that? My nurse's intuition screamed. Then came that Tuesday afternoon. Richard called my hotel, his voice unnervingly bright. "Martha, I think it's time. I know this is hard, but Diana wouldn't want this. The doctors say we should make the decision today. I have the papers ready. Can you come now?" Every cell in my body revolted. Something was profoundly wrong, but I couldn't articulate it. 40 years as a nurse told me families sometimes had to make impossible choices. I tried to tell myself I was just in denial, that I couldn't accept losing my sister. I walked into Diana's room at 3:30. Richard and Cassidy were there, no longer bothering to hide. She stood proprietarily close to him. They both turned as I entered, identical expressions of what I can only describe as sickening anticipation. On the bedside table, a stack of papers. A pen. Richard launched into his spiel immediately. "Martha, thank you for coming. I know this is difficult, but the doctors have made it clear. Diana is gone. These papers will allow us to remove the machines and let her pass in peace. As her sister, her healthcare proxy, you need to sign here and here and here. He jabbed at the lines, talking too fast, his finger almost aggressive. I reached for the pen. My hand was literally touching it when a firm grip closed around my wrist. The young nurse, probably late 20s, dark curly hair pulled back tight, had appeared out of nowhere. Her fingers were trembling, but her grip was like steel. "Ma'am," she whispered, urgent, barely audible. "Don't sign anything. Please, just trust me." Her eyes darted to Richard, then Cassidy.
And I saw it.
Raw, visceral fear. Richard's face flushed. "Excuse me, Nurse Jenkins, but this is a family matter. You are out of line." Jenkins, according to her badge, didn't let go. "I need to speak with Miss Reynolds alone. It's regarding her sister's medication schedule." "The medication schedule can wait," Cassidy snapped, stepping forward, radiating icy hostility. "Mr. Thornton has been through enough without you people interfering." But Jenkins stood her ground. "Hospital protocol requires I speak with family members privately about certain matters. It will only take 10 minutes. She looked at me, those pleading eyes. 10 minutes, Miss Reynolds. That's all I'm asking." Something in her desperation broke through my grief. I put the pen down. "Richard," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I think I need a moment anyway. This is overwhelming. Give me 10 minutes to talk to the nurse, clear my head. Then I'll sign." I watched his jaw clench, watched Cassidy whisper something. But they couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. He nodded stiffly. 10 minutes, Martha. But please, Diana's suffering. Every moment we delay is cruel." Jenkins practically pulled me out of the room, down a quiet corridor, and into a small consultation room. She locked the door behind us, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage the latch. "Miss Reynolds," she gasped, "I could lose my job for this. My license. But I can't stand by and watch them murder your sister." The words slammed into me like a physical blow. "Murder? What are you talking about?" "The doctors said." "The doctors don't know what I know," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "I've been Diana's primary nurse for the past 72 hours. I've watched her neurological responses. Miss Reynolds, your sister is not brain dead. She's in a medically induced coma. Yes, but her EEG shows activity. Her reflexes are present. 2 days ago, when Mr. Thornton and that woman weren't in the room, I did a sternal rub test. Your sister grimaced. That's a pain response. Brain-dead patients don't respond to pain." My medical training, buried beneath the grief, roared to life. "But the doctor's reports are based on assessments done when Mr. Thornton was present," I said, catching on. "I've noticed he always insists on being in the room during neurochecks. And I've seen him talking to Dr. Carlson, the attending, seen him hand over what looked like an envelope." Jenkins pulled out her phone, her hands still trembling. "Look, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm seeing things because I'm young and inexperienced. But 2 nights ago, I couldn't sleep. So I came back to check on your sister around 2 a.m. I found Mr. Thornton and that Cassidy woman in the room alone with Diana. The 4 bag had been changed, but it wasn't on my schedule. I checked it afterward. Someone had added additional sedatives, way beyond what was prescribed." She showed me photos on her phone, time-stamped. Richard leaning over Diana's 4. Cassidy standing watch at the door. Another photo of the 4 bag label, showing medications that shouldn't have been there. "I reported it to my supervisor," Jenkins continued, her voice raw. "But Dr. Carlson said I was mistaken. Said he'd ordered the change and forgotten to update the chart. He told me if I made accusations again, I'd be terminated for insubordination. But Miss Reynolds, I've been checking Diana's chart every shift. Someone keeps increasing her sedation. Just enough to keep her unresponsive, but not enough to kill her outright. They need those papers signed first. Need it to look legal." My mind reeled, trying to connect the dots.
Why?
Why would Richard do this? Jenkins hesitated. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I overheard them talking in the hallway yesterday. That woman, Cassidy, she's not a grief counselor. She called him baby. They were talking about finally being free, and something about a life insurance policy and moving to the Cayman Islands once it's all over. The pieces crashed into place with horrifying clarity. Diana's life insurance. The $3 million policy she'd taken out 5 years ago. The house, easily worth $2 million. The investment accounts. My sister, my vibrant, loving sister, was worth more dead than alive to a man who'd found someone new. Do you have any proof? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt, though my insides churned. Anything that would stand up? Jenkins bit her lip. Not enough. Just my observations, my photos, my word against a doctor and a wealthy man. But Miss Reynolds, if you sign those papers, they'll remove life support within the hour. And I believe, with the right treatment, with proper sedation reduction, your sister could wake up. Then we need proof, I said, my mind already racing. 40 years as an ER nurse had taught me a lot about reading people, reading situations, thinking fast under pressure. And we need it in the next few minutes or Richard will get suspicious. An idea formed, risky, possibly illegal, but absolutely necessary. Do you have access to the security cameras? Jenkins nodded slowly. The recordings are kept in the security office, but I'm friends with Marcus, one of the guards. If I told him I needed to review footage for a potential incident report, do it, I commanded. Pull footage from Diana's room for the past 72 hours. Focus on times when Richard was alone with her, or with that Cassidy woman. And I need you to do something else. I pulled out my phone. I'm going to go back in that room and tell them I'm ready to sign, but I'm going to stall. Ask questions. Make Richard explain everything in detail. I want you to have someone review Diana's current sedation levels right now, without Dr. Carlson knowing. Is there another doctor you trust? Dr. Patel. Jenkins said immediately, a spark of hope in her eyes. He's the head of neurology. Not on Dr. Carlson's service. He's honest old school. He doesn't tolerate any irregularities. Get him to look at Diana now, I urged. And Jenkins, record everything. If Richard and Cassidy say anything incriminating while I'm in there, we need it documented. She nodded, understanding dawning. The room has audio monitoring for patient safety. If I activate it from the nurse's station, everything said in that room will be recorded. Do it, I said, a grim resolve settling over me. I'll give you 20 minutes instead of 10. Tell Richard the first needed medical clarification about the forms. 20 minutes later, I walked back into Diana's room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my face composed. Years of keeping calm during codes in the ER served me well. Richard sprang up immediately, that false concern plastered on his face. Martha, finally. Are you ready? Almost, I said, picking up the papers, my fingers brushing the pen. I just need to understand a few things first. As a nurse, I need to be sure we're doing the right thing. I watched Richard's eye twitch. Cassidy moved closer to him, and I noticed for the first time that she was holding his hand, no longer bothering to hide it. What is there to understand? Richard said, an edge creeping into his voice. The doctors have been clear. Diana is brain dead. There's no hope. I know that's what Dr. Carlson said. I replied carefully, pretending to read the documents. But I was wondering about second opinions. Diana always said she'd want every option explored. Maybe we should consult with another neurologist before we... There's no time for that. Cassidy cut in, then caught herself. I mean, what Mr. Thornton means is that it would only prolong the inevitable and cause more suffering. Cassidy's right, Richard said quickly. And frankly, Martha, the costs are mounting. Every day on these machines is costing thousands. Diana wouldn't want to drain her estate on futility. There it was. The first slip. He was thinking about her estate. About money. Of course, I said softly, as if considering it. I just want to make sure I understand the medical situation completely. You said brain aneurysm, right? But I've seen aneurysm patients before. Usually there's a CT scan and angio. I'd love to see Diana's imaging just to understand what happened to my baby sister. Richard's face was getting redder. The scans were done. They showed massive hemorrhage. Dr. Carlson has them. I'd still like to see them, I pressed. And I'd like to understand the timeline. She collapsed at home, you said. What was she doing when it happened? Richard started, then paused. She was upstairs. I heard a thud. What time was this? Around 9 in the morning. And you called 911 immediately? Another pause. Longer this time. Well, I checked on her first. Made sure she was breathing. How long before you called? I don't know, Martha. Maybe 10 minutes. I was in shock. 10 minutes is a long time when someone is having a brain bleed, I said, watching him carefully. Every instinct alight. Every second counts. Cassidy squeezed his hand. He did the best he could under terrible circumstances. I'm sure he did, I said, turning my gaze to her. Cassidy, you've been so supportive. How long have you known Richard? She blinked, clearly caught off guard. Through the hospital, as I mentioned, right? As the grief counselor. Which agency are you with? I pressed, sweet as honey. I'd love to send them commendations for your dedication. That's not necessary. Richard snapped, his patience evaporating. Martha, these questions are irrelevant. The only relevant thing is Diana's condition, which is hopeless. Now, are you going to sign these papers or not? I looked at my sister, lying so still in that bed. The machines breathing for her, monitoring her, keeping her alive despite someone's best efforts to the contrary. I just need one more thing, I said, my voice softening. I want to say goodbye properly. Alone. Just 5 minutes with my sister, and then I'll sign. We've all said our goodbyes, Richard protested, but it was weak. Please, I pleaded, letting my voice crack with real, raw emotion. She's the only family I have left. Just 5 minutes. He couldn't refuse that without looking like a monster.
Fine.
5 minutes. We'll wait outside. As they left, Richard whispered something to Cassidy I couldn't quite hear, but I saw his eyes dart to the papers on the bedside table. Saw him touch the pen, as if to ensure it was still there. The moment they were gone, I rushed to Diana's bedside and took her hand. Hold on, baby girl, I whispered, tears finally escaping. I've got you.
I've always got you.
And then I saw it. The smallest flutter of her eyelids. So subtle it could have been my imagination, but I knew it wasn't. Jenkins had been right. Before my 5 minutes were up, Jenkins slipped into the room. Dr. Patel reviewed her chart. He's furious. Her sedation levels are 3 times what they should be for a patient in her condition. He's already ordered the medications reduced. And Martha. She held up a tablet. We pulled the security footage. And there, playing out in fast forward, were Richard's sins from the past 72 hours. Adjusting 4 bags when nurses weren't looking. Him and Cassidy kissing in the hallway. Him meeting with Dr. Carlson in a parking garage, handing over a thick envelope. And then, the most damning of all, footage from the morning Diana collapsed. Richard entering their bedroom at 8 a.m. with a syringe. Diana, visible through the doorway, still asleep in bed. 30 minutes later, Richard calling 911, claiming his wife had just collapsed. He injected her with something. I breathed, the realization cold and sharp. He caused this. Dr. Patel has already called hospital security and the police, Jenkins said, her voice trembling but firm. They're on their way. But Martha, Richard's going to realize something's wrong soon. We need to keep him here. I'll handle it, I said grimly, my grief now replaced by a chilling calm. I walked out to the waiting area where Richard and Cassidy stood close, whispering. When they saw me, they sprang apart, but not quickly enough. I'm ready to sign, I announced, my voice hollow, a perfect imitation of despair. Richard's face lit up with triumph. Thank God, Martha. You're doing the right thing. Diana would be grateful. We walked back into the room together, all 3 of us. I picked up the pen, held it over the first signature line. And then I looked up at Richard. Before I sign, I said, my voice cutting through the false solemnity, I just have one question. When did you start planning to kill my sister? The room went utterly silent. Richard's face drained of all color. Cassidy gasped, a strangled sound. What are you talking about? Richard stammered, his voice thin, panicked. Martha, the grief is making you irrational. Is it? I said, slowly setting the pen back down. Is it grief making me notice that you injected Diana with something the morning she collapsed? That you've been overdosing her on sedatives to keep her unconscious? That you bribed Dr. Carlson to falsify her neurological assessments? That's insane. Richard yelled, but his voice shook, his eyes darting frantically. You have no proof of. Actually, we have quite a bit of proof, a new voice boomed. Dr. Patel entered the room, followed by 2 police officers and hospital security. Mr. Thornton, I'm Dr. Patel, head of neurology. I've reviewed your wife's case, and I'm appalled. Not only has her care been criminally negligent, but there's clear evidence of deliberate harm. Richard backed toward the door, but security blocked it. This is ridiculous. I demand to speak to my lawyer. You'll have that opportunity, one of the officers said, pulling out handcuffs. Richard Thornton, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. Cassidy tried to run, but the second officer caught her easily. Cassidy Morrison, you're also under arrest as an accessory. As they were led away, Richard screaming about false accusations and Cassidy sobbing hysterically, Dr. Patel turned to me. Miss Reynolds, your sister is being moved to a different unit immediately under my direct care. We're reducing her sedation as we speak. If Nurse Jenkins's observations are correct, Diana may begin to wake up within 24 to 48 hours. My knees went weak, and Jenkins caught my elbow. She's going to be okay? I whispered, tears of relief finally flowing freely. The next few days will be critical, Dr. Patel said honestly. But yes, I believe she has a real chance at recovery. Thanks to you and Nurse Jenkins, we caught this in time. I looked at Jenkins, this brave, young woman who'd risked everything to save a patient she barely knew. Thank you, I choked out. You saved my sister's life. She smiled through her own tears. It's what we're supposed to do, right? First, do no harm. 48 hours later, I was holding Diana's hand when her eyes fluttered open. The confusion in them cleared slowly as the last of the sedatives wore off, and then she focused on my face. Martha. Her voice was raspy, weak, but it was her voice. I'm here, baby girl, I said, squeezing her hand, my heart overflowing. I've got you.
What?
What happened? That's a long story, I said, a soft laugh escaping me. But the short version is that your husband is a monster, and you're going to be just fine. Over the next week, as Diana grew stronger, the full, sickening scope of Richard's betrayal came to light. He'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. Cassidy Morrison was a woman he'd met at a conference a year ago, and they'd been having an affair ever since. When Diana mentioned wanting to update her will to leave more to charity, Richard had panicked. He'd needed her dead before she could change anything. The injection that morning? A carefully calculated dose meant to cause a stroke or aneurysm without being obviously poisonous. With Dr. Carlson's help, bought for $50,000, they'd falsified her medical records to show brain death when she was merely deeply sedated. The life insurance policy would have paid $3 million. The house, the investments, everything would have been Richard's. He and Cassidy had already booked flights to the Cayman Islands, scheduled to leave the day after Diana's planned death. Instead, Richard and Cassidy were both facing 25 years to life for attempted murder and conspiracy. Dr. Carlson lost his medical license and faced charges of conspiracy and medical fraud. And Diana, against all odds, made a near-complete recovery. 6 months later, I stood beside Diana in divorce court. She was thinner, walked with a slight limp that the neurologist said might never fully disappear, but she was alive. The judge granted her everything, every penny, every asset. Richard would have nothing but his prison cell. As we walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunshine, Diana linked her arm through mine. Thank you, she said quietly, for not signing those papers, for trusting your instincts. Thank Nurse Jenkins, I corrected gently. She's the real hero. I plan to, Diana said, a determined glint in her eye. In fact, I'm funding a scholarship in her name at the nursing school for students who show exceptional moral courage. We walked in silence for a moment. Then Diana stopped and looked at me, a fierce, triumphant smile on her face. You know what's funny? Richard thought I was worth more dead than alive. But he was wrong. I'm worth so much more alive. I get to see my niece's graduate. I get to take that trip to Italy. I get to testify against him in court. She squeezed my arm. And I get to live my life knowing that no matter what he tried to take from me, he failed. 3 months after that, Diana and I sat on a beach in Positano, Italy, watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean in shades of gold and pink. She'd asked Nurse Jenkins to join us, and the young woman sat beside us, enjoying her first vacation in 2 years. To second chances, Diana said, raising her glass of Prosecco. To listening to your gut, I added, clinking my glass against hers. To doing the right thing, even when it's scary, Jenkins said softly. We clinked our glasses together as the sun dipped below the horizon, and I thought about how close we'd come to losing everything. 10 minutes. That's all it had taken. 10 minutes of trusting a stranger's urgent warning. 10 minutes that changed everything. So tell me, have you ever had that moment? That split second where you had to choose between what seemed logical and what your instinct screamed at you? Share your story in the comments below, because you never know who might need to hear it. And if this story moved you, please share it. Because somewhere out there, someone might be facing their own 10-minute decision. Let's make sure they make the right one. Thank you for watching Twisted RT Stories. If you want to hear more true stories that will make you think twice about trusting the wrong people, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. I'll see you in the next story. And remember, always trust your instincts. They might just save you.